White judge finds black woman, only to learn. She's an Olympic champion part. The old courthouse stood tall in the center of Oakfield. Its stone walls had seen many stories unfold over the years. Inside courtroom 12, Judge Robert Collins tapped his pen against the wooden desk. At 62, he had spent half his life making decisions about other people's mistakes. "Next case," he called out, his voice firm but tired. The woman who stepped forward looked worn out. Her name was Mary Wilson. She wore simple work clothes, with a name tag still pinned to her shirt. Her eyes showed she hadn't slept much. "Ms. Wilson, you were caught driving 40 miles per hour in a 20-mile school zone." "What do you have to say?" Judge Collins asked without looking up from his papers. Mary stood straight despite her tiredness. "Yes, Your Honor, I was speeding. My mother was taken to hospital suddenly. The school zone is on the direct path there." Judge Collins had heard many stories over the years, some true, some made up to avoid fines. He looked at Mary properly for the first time. "Do you have proof of this hospital visit?" he asked. Mary reached into her bag and pulled out a hospital form. "My mother has a heart problem. She collapsed at home. I got the call while at work." The judge looked at the paper and handed it back. His face showed no emotion. Rules were rules, after all. "While I understand your worry, Ms. Wilson, the law is clear. School zones have strict speed limits to keep children safe. The fine is £300. Mary's shoulders dropped slightly, but she nodded. "I understand, Your Honor. When must I pay it?" 30 days, he replied, already looking at the next case file. Mary thanked him politely and left the courtroom. Judge Collins called the next case without a second thought. For him, it was just another normal day. For Mary, it meant working extra shifts at her job. Outside the courthouse, rain began to fall. Mary pulled her thin jacket closer and walked to the bus stop. She thought about her mother in the hospital bed and the bills that kept piling up. The fine would make things harder, but she wouldn't complain. Life had taught her that complaining rarely helped. What Mary didn't know was that life would soon bring her and Judge Collins together again. Their next meeting would change both their lives in ways neither could imagine. But for now, she simply waited for the bus in the rain, thinking about how to find an extra £300 when every penny already had a purpose. And Judge Collins went home to his empty house, ate his usual dinner alone, and fell asleep watching the news. Neither knew that in just 2 weeks their paths would cross again in the most unexpected way. Sometimes life has a strange way of teaching lessons to those who need them most. For Judge Collins, that lesson was waiting just around the corner, ready to show him that behind every case number was a real person with a real story worth hearing. The end. White judge finds black woman, only to learn she's an Olympic champion part. 2 weeks after the court case, Judge Robert Collins sat in his car outside Oakfield Primary School. His grandson Tom had begged him to come for the school's special visitor day. Robert didn't like these sorts of things, but he had promised. "Granddad, you're going to love it," Tom had said on the phone last night. "We have someone really famous coming." The school hall was packed with excited children sitting cross-legged on the floor. Parents and guests sat on plastic chairs at the back. Robert felt too big for the small chair, but he smiled at Tom, who waved from his place with the other 9-year-olds. The head teacher, Mrs. Bell, walked to the front with a big smile. "Boys and girls, we have a very special treat today. Someone from our very own town who has made us all proud." The children clapped loudly. Judge Collins checked his watch. He had another court session in 2 hours. "Please welcome our local Olympic gold medal winner, Mary Wilson." The room erupted in cheers. Robert's head snapped up. Mary Wilson? It couldn't be the same person. But it was. The woman who walked onto the small stage was indeed the same woman he had fined 2 weeks ago. Gone were the tired eyes and worn work clothes. Today she wore a smart tracksuit with the national team logo. Around her neck hung a gold medal. Robert sat very still, watching as Mary smiled at the children. Her whole face lit up as she spoke about her journey. "I started running when I was just like you," she told them. "I didn't have special shoes or a coach. I just had a dream, and my mom who believed in me." She talked about waking up at 5 every morning to train before school, about working evening shifts at the supermarket to pay for competition fees, about caring for her sick mother between training sessions. There were many times I wanted to give up, she said. Many people told me I couldn't do it, but I kept going one step at a time. The children listened with wide eyes. Even the fidgety ones sat still. Robert found himself leaning forward, hanging on every word. 2 years ago, my mother got very ill. I nearly quit everything to look after her. But she made me promise to keep going. Your dreams matter too, she told me. So I kept training, kept working, and kept hoping. Mary smiled at the memory. And then last summer I stood on that Olympic podium with this medal around my neck. Not bad for a girl from the east side of Oakfield, right? The children cheered again. Mrs. Bell asked if anyone had questions. A small girl put up her hand. Was it hard to train and work and look after your mum? Mary's smile softened. Yes, it was, very hard. Just 2 weeks ago, my mum had another health scare. I was at work when I got the call. I rushed to the hospital so fast I got a speeding ticket. The children laughed, but Robert felt his face grow hot. He remembered her now, standing in his courtroom, explaining about her mother. He hadn't really listened. He hadn't cared. As the talk ended, the children gathered around Mary for autographs. Robert stayed in his seat watching. He had seen thousands of people in his courtroom over the years. How many of them had stories he never bothered to hear? For the first time in a long time, Judge Collins felt something he hadn't expected. Shame, the end white judge finds black woman, only to learn she's an Olympic champion part. 3 that night, Judge Robert Collins could not sleep. He kept seeing Mary Wilson's face as she spoke to those children. He kept hearing her words about rushing to the hospital, the very day he had fined her without a second thought. Robert got out of bed and went to his study. His house was quiet and dark. He lived alone since his wife Jane died 5 years ago. Sometimes he thought the silence was the hardest part. He turned on his computer and typed, Mary Wilson Olympic gold. Many stories appeared. He clicked on the first one. Mary had grown up in the poorest part of town. Her father left when she was 3. Her mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Mary showed talent for running at school, but there was no money for proper training. Robert read how Mary would run around the local park every morning before school, how she worked nights at the supermarket while studying, how she missed the Olympics twice before finally making the team. Her mother had been diagnosed with a heart condition 10 years ago. Mary had almost given up her dream to care for her, but her mother had insisted she keep trying. The article showed a picture of Mary hugging her mother after winning gold. The older woman was in a wheelchair, an oxygen tube in her nose, but her smile was as bright as the metal around her daughters. Robert sat back in his chair. For 20 years he had seen people as either lawbreakers or law followers. Nothing in between. No stories, no struggles, no dreams. He remembered Mary standing in his courtroom. She had been polite but tired. She had tried to explain about her mother. He hadn't really listened. How many others had he judged too quickly? How many stories had he ignored? The next morning, Robert went to the hospital. He asked at the front desk about Mrs. Wilson. Room 215, the nurse told him, but family only. I'm not family, Robert admitted. I just wanted to know how she's doing. The nurse looked at him for a moment. She's stable but still weak. Her daughter is with her now. Robert thanked her and left. He wasn't ready to face Mary yet, but he needed to make things right somehow. That afternoon in court, Robert looked at each person differently. A young man who had been caught stealing food. Robert asked why. The man's wife had just had a baby and he had lost his job. Robert ordered community service instead of a fine. A woman who had parked illegally. Her child was having an asthma attack and the hospital car park was full. Robert dismissed the charge. His clerk looked surprised. You're in a good mood today, Judge, she said during a break. Robert didn't smile. Not a good mood, just trying to see the whole picture for once. That evening, he went to the local running track. He had read that Mary trained there with young people 3 times a week. He sat on a bench and watched. Mary was showing a group of teenagers how to set up starting blocks. She was patient, encouraging each one. These weren't rich kids with expensive trainers. They wore whatever they had, just like Mary had once done. As the session ended and the young people left, Robert knew what he needed to do. Not just for Mary, but for himself, and for all the people who would come into his courtroom in the future. The end. White judge finds black woman, only to learn. She's an Olympic champion. Part 4. The next day, Robert stood outside the running track, watching as Mary finished her session with the teenagers. His heart beat fast. He had never been good at saying sorry. As a judge, he rarely had to. The young people waved goodbye to Mary as they left. She began to pack up the training cones and starting blocks. Robert took a deep breath and walked towards her. "Ms. Wilson?" he said. Mary looked up. It took her a moment to recognize him without his black robe and wig. When she did, her smile faded a little. "Judge Collins," she said, standing up straight. "What brings you here?" Robert felt his carefully planned words disappear from his mind. "I saw you at my grandson's school yesterday," he said instead. "Your talk was very good." "Thank you," Mary replied, putting the last cone into a bag. She didn't seem angry, just careful. "I didn't know you were an Olympic athlete," Robert continued. He was making a mess of this. Mary looked at him directly now. "There are a lot of things you didn't know about me when I stood in your courtroom, Judge Collins." Her words weren't mean, just honest. Robert nodded. "You're right. And that's why I'm here." He took another deep breath. "I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson. I should have listened better. I should have cared more about why you were speeding, not just that you were." Mary seemed surprised. "Judges don't usually say sorry." "This one does. Today, at least." Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "I've canceled your fine, but that's not enough. I want to do more." Mary took the envelope but didn't open it. "You don't have to do more, Judge Collins. You were doing your job." "Perhaps, but not very well." Robert looked around at the old running track with its cracked surface and faded lines. "I've been reading about you, about how you train these kids for free, about how you never had proper training yourself." Mary smiled a little. "We make do with what we have. But what if you had more?" Robert asked. "I know people with money, people who could help fix this place up, who could provide proper equipment, maybe even some coaching money." Mary's eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" Robert thought about it. "Because you made me see something I've been missing. In my courtroom, I see people on their worst days. I see their mistakes, their poor choices. But I rarely see their struggles, their dreams, their whole story." He looked at the teenagers walking home across the field. "These kids need someone who sees them, really sees them. You do that. I want to help." Mary was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. A real smile this time. "My kids would love a track that doesn't give them splinters." "Consider it done," Robert said. He held out his hand. Mary shook it firmly. As he walked back to his car, Robert felt lighter than he had in years. Tomorrow he would make some calls, set up some meetings, start the ball rolling. But tonight, he had something else to do. He drove to the hospital and bought flowers from the shop in the entrance. Then he took the lift to the second floor and found room 215. The end. White judge finds black woman, only to learn. She's an Olympic champion. Part 5-6 months passed. The old running track at Oakfield had changed. New rubber surfacing replaced the cracked concrete. Proper lane markings shone bright white against the red track. A small building stood where once there had been only a rusty shed.